How's it going, folks? I want to continue my mixing death metal series. You'll maybe have seen previously I did a video on mixing death metal vocals and mixing death metal guitars, which you can check out at the top or down below or somewhere. But I've kind of got some more to say about this, and I feel that it's important to go through drums, and I feel like it's important to go through individual drums because in death metal in particular, it's not like normal music. You have to go extreme and you have to do some things that you wouldn't typically do in other kinds of music, as we saw in the vocals and guitars sections. So check those ones out if they're of interest to you, but this one is going to be focusing solely on the snare drum, getting a big, powerful death metal sound out of something that, although it's got a nice amount of crack to it, not got a massive amount of body in the first place, we definitely need to improve it. So let's just check it out. So I've got three snare tracks here. I've got snare top, I've got snare bottom, and I've got snare trig. Now, trig is a trigger, obviously. I'm not going to be leaning on that 100%. You can do that and just trigger it and say, hey, it sounds like a great snare, but I prefer not to do that, particularly with this drummer. He's so dynamic, he's so expressive, and it's worth getting some of the mic channel in there for the majority of it. I am adding a trigger, but not for everything, as we'll see. So let's take a look at the mixer. First of all then, let's just take a listen to the snare drum on its own without any of this processing and just kind of hear where our starting point is. So that's the top, sounds good, decent amount of spill, but sounds good. The bottom. Okay, and then the trigger track is just a duplicate of the top track. Now there is some processing going on there with the drums overall, like with the buses. So I can take that off as well, and then you can have a little listen. Top. I'll come to my bus processing in a bit. Let's just focus on these individual drums because there's some interesting stuff going on here. Now, deBleed, you'll see here and here. This is a great plugin, and I'm a big believer in getting rid of what you don't want before you start adding what you do want. Typically, if you start adding a load of top end to something, then you bring out a load of hi-hat. Then you go to a gate, and it just doesn't sound right because you've brought up the wrong stuff first. Get rid of the rubbish before you start adding the good stuff. So just take a listen to the snare top before and after this comes in, and it's like a gate, except I don't like gates, but I do like this because it's like a really clever, intelligent kind of gate. It's wicked. And the thing to remember here is that I'm using each mic for its own kind of thing. So the snare top mic is there to get some of the realism. I'm not aiming to get like the full sustain, the full impact out of just this one mic because I'm dealing with some other stuff as well. I've got the bottom, I've got the trigger. But this is just cleaning it up so well. And I could go into all the details about this, but I've done a video on this a little while ago, which you can check out down the bottom, up the top, whatever. And it's just great. I love it. I've got this on the top and I've got it on the snare bottom as well. But let's have a look at any processing I've got on the snare top because it's kind of minimal, but it's important. So this is with the gate engaged, and that's the first thing I always want to do. Secondly, let's just take a look at what's going on here. Okay, so virtual channel and the 1176. What I'm doing here really is absolutely cranking the virtual channel. You'll see it's red lighting. I've got drive all the way up. I've got input all the way up almost, which is bringing the output down. And I'm on the Neve setting. I like this because it just makes things fat and chunky. It just works. And then the 1176, what I'm not doing is absolutely annihilating it, absolutely slamming it, but I'm giving it a decent amount. So I've got it on its slowest attack, fastest release, and that release thing is going to come in a little bit later. And I'm just giving it a healthy dose of compression, which is just fattening things and just adding some real character to it. So I'll take off the compressor and the virtual channel in series, and just so you can see what's going on with each one. So you can see that it's really the 1176 that is doing the lion's share of the stuff. This is really just kind of a squashy thing, thickness, and overall it's just going to be leveling out some of the hits. So that's good. We like that. Let's take a look at the snare bottom, because if you've got the luxury of having a snare bottom, then you should use it, obviously. But only if it sounds good. And in this instance, I had both of these mics and one of them was out of phase. So with the snare bottom mic, always check the phase, because you got two microphones pointing, what would it be, like one like that and one like that, at the source from different angles. So as there's a positive wave in one, there's a negative wave in the other. So if I don't have this phase inverted, then it kind of sounds pretty thin. You can hear that's kind of thin without it. And if we indeed zoom in all the way to some of these transients, we'll see that the positives aren't really lined up. So we've got a positive on the top there, and it's not lined up at all. And negatives indeed aren't lined up either. So good example of something that's kind of out of phase. But the thing to remember about phase, I'm not going to go into it right now, is that phase is kind of a constant thing, and it's at different frequencies as well. So something is never like completely 100% out of phase unless you make it so. In the studio, you're never going to get something that's completely 100% out of phase. You just have to choose, is in phase better or is out of phase better? In this case, as is majority of the time, inverting the polarity on the snare bottom mic is going to work. So let's take a listen to that snare bottom, because I'm really not doing a whole lot to this, but I'm going to show you what I could do, which if you've got an issue with sustain, then it's going to help things. So let's listen without it first. Nice. Just cleaning it up so much. If you're having a problem with the sustain on the snare bottom mic, here's something great that you can do. Let's just go to our compressor, just any old compressor for now. And I'm going to stick it on, actually, let's go on to, what's 1176? There we go. Right, so I'm going to bring this up to like 4:1. And what we really want to do here is just destroy the initial transient, but bring up the sustain. So attack on fastest, release on fastest. I'm going to go about 4:1, and then I'm going to bring down the threshold. What it's going to do is completely destroy that transient, completely kill it, and then just because the fastest release is applied, it's just going to let that sustain come up afterwards. There you go. Without it. It's just making the snare even snarier. Like the under snare mic is, I don't know, it's not an effect mic, but it's something that you don't always need. And to me, I don't want the initial hit off that. I just want the sparkly stuff from the snare, the rattle. And that's exactly what this kind of compressor can do. So listening to them both together now with that processing applied, then we'll take the processing off afterwards and hear what it's got to say for itself. It's definitely getting there. What I actually want to do now, though, is bring it into the track and just play you why I had to bring a sample in there. So here it comes. This is with the snare, with the processing. None of the bus processing yet, but just what we've seen so far.
Honesty and truth will converge on fate.
Okay, so it's got that pop, it's got that snap, but it just doesn't have the weight. And the weight, you've got to have it. Sometimes in, I don't know, I guess this is kind of like modern death metal, really. In the older stuff, just having that snap on the snare is kind of enough. But for me, for my taste, it just doesn't do it. It doesn't give me enough. So what I've done on the overall snare bus is just a little bit of brightening, a little bit of sweetening in the mid-range. And as I say, it's, when I say a little bit, I mean quite a lot. 4K going up 5 dB. That's a significant amount. Have a listen. Because I just wanted to crack through, I wanted to snap through. And then the virtual mix rack, I'm just doing, well, I say I'm doing a lot, but I'm doing a lot of the same thing. So take a listen without and then with. This is the API EQ, slamming the high end, slamming the low end. Revival, slamming the low end, slamming the high end. And just take a listen before and after. It's night and day. That is that low end that I needed. That is really, the API EQ is doing a hell of a lot there. 135 hertz, slamming that low end. But Revival is my secret weapon for snares. I just love it. Listen to it without the Revival. And yeah, it sounds thicker, it sounds good. But when you bring it in, it just sounds glorious. It just has this ability to make a snare sound more like a snare. And it just kind of has this way of making a snare that is a bit lackluster. And with 2 knobs, it's just like, right, more body and more top end. And in my opinion, you really can't go overboard with Revival on a snare in particular. It's just awesome. So what have we got going on with this trigger? Because admittedly, on its own, like without the trigger track now, listen to it in the song and it sounds pretty good. Remember, there's no trigger there yet. That's just the microphones, and I think it really does sound great. But the trigger is just adding a little something underneath. So let's take a listen to, well, the actual sound itself, because that's kind of important. So in fact, let's take off the processing first and just take a listen to the trigger. Okay. Completely different sound than the actual snare. And that's kind of the point. I wanted something that juxtaposed the actual snare sound, because what I wasn't getting from the snare mics, I was never going to get from the snare mics. That snare sounded a certain way. Anyone who's been mixing for a little while will know that if you have a source, you have that sound, then you can do a load of polishing, you can do a load of effects, a load of processing, but ultimately that sound is the way it sounds. And if you've got a snare that sounded the way it did, like the poppy cracky kind of thing, you're never going to get it to sound like this trigger without putting a trigger on. That's just kind of the way it is. So I'm using, I think these are, I can't remember, I think they're perhaps Jens Bogren samples, and they sound good. And then this one is Medium Brass Snare 1. This is from my Rock Snare pack, which you can check out down below. I'm using the Bogren ones, and they're adding something nice, but then this one is adding a load of crack. Just take a listen to this one on its own. Then if I mute that one, I'm getting a load of room off that one. And then this one, it's getting a load of bright snap to it. And so if I bring that back in with everything, then let's take a look at the processing that I've got going on here, because it's not a massive amount, but it's enough. Now, it did sound bright enough as it was, but in the track, I want some more brightness, because that's just me. So let's take a listen to this SSL EQ and see what it's doing. So why am I adding that much brightness? Well, what this trigger track is doing is it's adding a load of that room, and the room is kind of bright as it is, and I want to give it more of that roominess. I'm not really dealing with the initial kind of weight of the snare drum, because that's pretty much dealt with by the snare top mic. But that medium brass snare 1 sample has got all this brightness, and it's got this snariness to it, which just works perfectly when I bring it in with the rest of the snare. So what I want to do, bring the snare trigger track all the way down, just the snare solo at the moment, and then just bring it up. And you're going to hear why I've got this sample there, and you're going to hear also why I'm not just using the sample. The sample on its own would have been out of place, but combined with the rest of the stuff, it works perfectly. So you see that is kind of hitting considerably lower than the snare top mic, and that's sort of the point. I didn't want it to be just snare trigger, because that's a trap that a lot of people kind of fall into. It's just supporting. So if we take a listen without this snare trigger, I'm going to bring it down and then blend it up afterwards, and we'll hear why it needs to be there. So at those settings, if I just mute the snare trigger track, you'll hear that it's kind of blended in. It's somewhere around 50-50, maybe a little bit lower than that, I think. So much of that initial hit is still coming from the 2 mics, and that is exactly what it's all about. You get the sustain and kind of the sizzliness from the sample that you can't get from the original snare. So important. So I guess all there is to say now really is take a look at the effects on the drum Verb. I've got Verb Suite Classics, which I like. I think it's good. Let's take a listen. If I just mute all these other ones actually, and then just mute drum Verb and then bring it in again. Kind of a short chamber, coming up to a second in terms of chambers. That's relatively short. Just adding so much width, dimension, and just a kind of a cavernous thing, but it goes away straight away, and that's what I want. With the drum bomb, now this is an interesting one. I think I've spoken about this on some previous videos, but drum bomb to me is a kick and snare bus where I take off some of the low end and then give it a load of this bomber. And it's just like a parallel thing where it's a parallel kind of impact thing for me. And you don't notice it until you take it away. It's more prominent on the kick on this, but it's in there for the snare as well. Just take a look at this. I'm really kind of aiming for that point there, but then bring the intensity most of the way up. It's just a underlying parallel compression thing, or parallel kind of attack, I suppose. I don't know, it's weird, but I like it. I've always used it. And then the room is kind of cool. This one is from the BB Chamber from Kit Plugins. If you haven't seen this already, check it out. Don't know how much it is, sorry about that, but I love it. It was wicked. And I think at the time when I was doing this mix, this had just come out, so I was using it pretty heavily. And it's a great sounding room. So you can see I've got all the drums going to it, and those 3 buses on their own. It's a pretty big part of the drum sound, I would have said, really. If we take a listen to, I've got the snare soloed, no I haven't. Let's solo the snare and then mute those drum buses and the send, sorry, and you're going to hear a significant difference. They're really important. Also, I've got another drum bus thing. I've got the AMEK mastering compressor. I think this was a bit of an experiment for me just to see what it really did, and it was cool. I liked it. But you'll hear when all of the drums are actually coming into that. Let's solo just the drums, for example. That it's going to behave slightly differently. So take it off and then bring it back on again. It's a cool compressor. It's just adding some underneath stuff. It's adding some vibe and some character to that low end, and just kind of slamming down on things just a little bit. I'm not going crazy with the ratio. It's at what, 2-to-1. The overall, it's not being too aggressive. It is slamming stuff, but not like completely. It's not like an absolute destruction. It's just enough, should we say. Then I've got some EQ. I think this is, yeah, amazing. I'm only adding a little bit in the top end, a little tiny bit in the shelf. Look at that, barely anything. Take a listen to it. The AMEK stuff though is great. It's kind of weird looking. It looks a bit like a spaceship, but you either love it or hate it, but I think it's really rather good. This one is the Monster, which I'm now finding they've recently changed the GUI of, which I don't know if I'm a fan of that. That's weird. It's the first time I've opened it since it changed. Anyway, whatever. I've just got this as a, or I did have this as a parallel thing. You'll see the mixes at 0 though. What I was trying to do with this was just add a bit of character and a bit of vibe and a bit of underneath kind of stuff. That was before I put on the AMEK compressor. And this just didn't give me what I was after. The AMEK did it so much better. Let's take the AMEK off and then just bring this in a little bit and just see what it's giving me, but also what it's not giving me. To get it so that I could actually hear what it was doing and so that it was actually delivering something usable, I felt like at that point it was kind of detracting from the actual drum sound. And it's cool, it does a certain thing, and it's great when it's great, but to me, in this particular scenario, this AMEK is cool, and I'd really recommend checking it out. So let's take a listen to the full mix with all that snare drum processing on and just hear what it sounds like.
Embody the fix of the charge of a headless no one vision aligns to date. Honesty and truth would converge on fate.
I think it's a million times better, and hopefully some of those processing chains that you've seen here will help you. It's better to get rid of stuff before you add stuff. Always, always, always. And just make it sound a bit sweeter before you start adding stuff. That THR, the deBleed, is a big kind of secret trick of mine. Please do check it out below because it really is great. And very inexpensive as well. It's perfect when, if you're like me and you don't particularly like gates and you think they behave kind of erratically, which they do, then that is the one. That is the one that just works. Triggers, yeah, sometimes they're a bit of a swear word. I personally think that if the trigger is adding what you don't have in the original mic sound, then 100% perfect, go for it. If you're replacing it entirely, that's a kind of a completely different thing. But to me, I got a great sound out of the snare top and snare bottom to start off with. And what I was missing, I then delivered with the Snare Trigger track. As you heard, that was Snare, the brass snare one that is in my rock snare pack. Check it out down below. Yeah, drop us a comment. Let me know what you think. Have you got a better way of processing snare? I'd like to hear it. Until then, though, thanks a lot. I'll see you again soon. Take care.